The way you look at America, when you have lived under oppression, America is paradise. Of all the places on the planet that are least racist, it's America. That's a fact. They're willing to destroy a nation in order to rule over its ashes.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Tammy Peterson podcast. Today, my guest is Mr. Mark Mathabane. He's a very gracious person, and he said that he would speak to me, so I was very excited. And we had a very passionate conversation, a little bit about his story, but also something about what's going on in society today. So he had some very thoughtful things for us to think about and some action that we can take. Hello.
Hi, Tammy. Lovely
Hi,
to see you again.
Yes, thank you so much for coming on to my podcast. I've been looking forward to this conversation, since I met you, but really mostly after I finished reading your autobiography that you wrote between really your youngest years and when you were about 18.
Yes.
And what a jam-packed story that is. What a lot of history and what a lot of passion and information I got from that. So I don't know what's happened since, except for that I met you. That's all I know. Will you tell us something about yourself?
Well, as you know, it was such an odyssey and through such a crucible. For one's soul and humanity, because those were the stakes. It was not so much my freedom, but will I be able to survive as a human being?
Right. And so you're referring to the Kaffir Boy growing up in South Africa. Between what years?
I was born in 1960 and I left in 1978.
Right.
Yeah, so those were the years of the most intense oppression, because apartheid just felt that it had to break up the black family in order to cling to power, because this was sacrosanct. I mean, family was the citadel. For our future, and this is what made my mother's courage and my father's heroics, despite his emasculation, so poignant and inspiring, to me, because you can just imagine just being born into a nightmare. You are trapped in a shack without running water or electricity. You are sleeping on pieces of cardboard with newspapers for blankets. And you are asking yourself, why was I ever born? And that's not a question for a child to ponder. It's not. Right. Children are optimistic, they're innocent. They're very vibrant, and resilient. But under apartheid, my childhood was non-existent. I never, I had to behave like an adult and to expect a 5-year-old to protect its parents from the police. They should be protecting the 5-year-old from the police. But as you remember, they raided the shacks almost, daily,
And at night, and in the middle of the night.
Yeah, in the middle of the night. And with the sole intent, Tammy, of breaking up the family, arresting my father.
Yes, they had to carry a passport.
Yes, he had to carry, we call them passport to existence. Because they had to contain every detail about your life, where you were born, where you lived, and you had to produce it upon demand.
And they would be arrested because it would not be in order. They would say it was not in order.
And the getting it in order was Kafkaesque. I mean,
Right.
for instance, my father had to have a stamp to look for a job, but to get the stamp, he needed to have a job.
Yeah, absurd, completely absurd.
Yeah, but we felt, and this is where my mother came in so heroically. She said, "I have no other weapons to fight with but love. The love
Yes.
of my family, the love of my husband, of my children. And above all, I just want to make sure that this child of mine that I know is my child, even though the authorities, remember that story where they were questioning whether I was her child because she wanted a permit to register me at school. I mean,
Yes.
what mother doesn't know their own child?
Yes.
And you
Yes.
remember how she woke up every morning, in the middle of the night, you roused me from my bed of cardboards. Let's go, let's march in the darkness, in the cold, barefoot, to the police station to beg for the permit. And at the
Yes.
police station, they tell her, no, we won't issue you one unless you bring us the birth certificate. But, like so many women at that time, she had no access to maternity care. So I had to be home delivered, they called it. And so we had to march to the clinic, wait in a long line. And she did this for 6 months, 6 months, until that day, Tammy, when this apparition appears. When I think my mother is going insane because she's intoning this song about, how much she wants me to go to school. And then the nun the white nun appears. And you remember the terror I felt because I thought that the nun was a policeman in a wimple. Because the only white people I'd ever met were the police.
Right.
So I expected that, the wimple would go off, etc., and the handcuffs would come on. But you know what came on in the place? Tears. For the first time, I saw tears streak a white face. Do you know what that meant to me?
Oh,
It said,
amazing.
she feels my mother's pain. She is
Yeah.
human. She cares. That, Tammy, was the turning point because she took my mother by the hand, stormed into the office, and demanded that this woman, her sister, be given the piece of paper that
Yes.
saved my life.
What a miracle that was.
Yeah, it was. To this day, I mean, education was the key.
Yes, although it was brutal.
Oh, it was. Oh my goodness. When I speak at schools around the country, I say, you are in paradise. You
Right.
think you have problems? Believe me, it was worse than in Dickens' time because they would whip you if you arrived late at school, late. There were no school buses, so you had to trudge to school, oftentimes without breakfast. But that's no excuse. They whip you, and it's not with little pedals, it's with canes, bamboo sticks.
Oh.
And if you didn't do your homework, they whipped you. If you did it and got it wrong, you were whipped.
Right.
If you didn't put on how many children would stay in a school like that?
Why did you stay? Why did you stay?
Well, because of my mother. You remember when I got back home and I found that there had been this big fight with my father and that she had fled to Granny's place. And then I went to Granny's. It was my first day of school. I went to Granny's, and after I stormed into the shack, I looked for my mother. She's right in front of me. But the reason I cannot recognize her is because her face is swollen.
Oh,
she had been, and I asked, I said, Granny, what happened? She says, well, your father got mad because your mother used money earmarked for food. This was to keep you alive for a week. and she paid your school fees.
Yes.
So that you,
How brave is that, huh?
Because she knew, and I could understand my dad's fury, we are going to starve for a week and you go and pay for him to attend. What kind of a school is this? But it's because my mother had this prescience, the ability to see into the future, to say, if he learns to read and write, at least he has a fighting chance.
And so what language were you learning to read and write in?
Oh, well, that was another way the system was Machiavellian. They did not teach you English until the 5th grade, when they knew that most of you would have dropped out.
Right.
So that was, so they taught you in your tribal language. That's why how key English became. It was the key that unlocked another world for me.
Right. How were you going to communicate with anyone outside of your little community?
Exactly. That was the intent. You see, that was the intent.
Oh, yes, yes.
And that's why I tell young people here, I said, you must, English is my 6th language. And for you, it's your 1st.
Yes.
And yet you still have no proficiency. But it's the gateway to knowledge. It's the gateway to the world. Who is going to understand what you're thinking or feeling, or who you are, without your articulating that to the world,
Exactly. And being able to speak what you know to be true as well.
Absolutely. That was the key to me, to liberate my mind. Because I know about the physical deprivations, having to go to garbage dumps, looking for food, drinking kettle bladder soup. You remember all those horrors,
Yes.
But, the enslavement of the mind, to me, was the most formidable. Because you started to believe that you were a victim. You started to believe what other people said you were. You started to limit your aspirations, and you even gave them the power to define your humanity. Whereas if you can read, if you can think, then you are in control of your destiny.
And so then you got books to read when you could read English, right?
In English.
But not till you could read English?
Exactly.
That's when the books came.
Yes. Remember my grandmother saying, I want to take you to the white world, where she worked as a gardener. And I said, Grandma wants me to take me to Dante's Inferno. That is hell, because that's where all the policemen, are occupying all these different circles. So
The judgment,
but Mother said, you must go. You have to go, because this family, and talk about the ability of these illiterate women to have this foresight, this intuitive, and they said, there's this little boy who's a spoiled brat. He has a room bigger than your house. It's full of toys, it's full of books, but he's never satisfied. He's always asking his mother for more. And so if they saw you and realized that you were the best student, this is Granny giving the pitch, saying you're the best student at the school, then you'll have all this largesse, because he's always throwing toys and everything away. And of course, Granny was right, because when I mustered my terror and went in the black bus, because they were not, the buses were separate. There was a black bus and a white bus. It was not you sit in front or in the back, black bus. So when it left the ghetto and went into the white world, I was like in Shangri-La. Honestly, it was like another planet. And yet they had been separated by just a highway in Johannesburg, but it was another world. And I couldn't believe that, this is where, white people lived. But when I arrived at the family...
How old were you?
I was about 10. I was
about 10
years old. 10 years old. And of course, when I arrived, the mother, who is British, immigrant, she so much wants the child not to learn the lessons of apartheid. So she says, play with, Ellen, that's my grandmother, play with Ellen's grandson. And she says, at my school, they say we shouldn't play with black children. Yeah, I mean, those were the lessons being taught to the.
Right.
That's why hate is taught. It's not innate, you know.
Yeah.
People should get rid of that nonsense. Nobody's born a racist.
Absolutely.
You learn it.
Yes,
and
it's learned.
You learn, you can unlearn. But anyway, when, you know, he was told to play with me and said that, he says, well, he grabbed me, takes me to his room, and he says, look at what I have. He shows me this Alibaba cave, you know, full of, you know, and I said, wow, he has more books than we have at our entire school. So he sees me looking at the books, because I love books, you know, and he says, can you read English? I thought it was the, you know, pidgin English that we're being taught. I said, yes, I can, you know.
Yes.
I said, yes, I can, master, you know, human. And so he's, you know, he grabs a tome. I still remember, it's this big. It was Shakespeare. So, so he opens a random page and he says, read. You know that Shakespeare is like hieroglyphics, you know. I mean, it's Elizabethan English. So, you know, I'm mumbling and stumbling. Says, you're retarded. That's why you don't go to school with us. You see, your brain is smaller. So he regurgitates. And of course, the mother happens to be standing by the door. And here's, to her horror, she says, Clyde, don't, I told you that's rubbish. The black children are just like you. And of course, to compensate and talk about, you know, to compensate at the end of the day, she gives me this stack of books. Treasure Island is on top. There's Tale of Two Cities, The Last of the Mohicans. I mean, it was like, I couldn't believe, you know, and then of all miracles, there's also a magazine. And on the magazine is the face of a black man. And she wonders, why am I staring at this face? And says, oh, do you play tennis? You know, I said, oh, what's that? She says, well, it's played by ladies and gentlemen. I said, what's a gentleman? Also, she says, oh, a teaching moment. So she grabs the magazine and she says, this is a gentleman. She's pointing to a black face.
Right. Oh.
And now you can imagine in the wheels turning. I said, I've never seen my father, any other black person, command that admiration and respect.
Right.
You know, and so I associated admiration and respect with tennis. You know, so when, so it was not more than a game to me. It was the key to liberation, you know, because I knew that with the books and with the tennis racket, I will find the way to freedom. These are my North Star. And you know, that became...
That's such a hero's journey. That's such a hero's journey, you know, to go where no man has gone, into the belly of the beast.
Yes.
And to find the treasure. Take it from the dragon. I mean,
Yes.
Wow.
Oh, yes. That is so true, you know. That's the Campbell myth. You're absolutely right. It truly is a hero's journey. But the thing, the thing, Tammy, is that fast forward, you know, the trials along the way, the Scylla and the Charybdis, and I mean, it was like Jason and the Argonauts.
Well, you know, you get the treasure, but then you have to go back through the desert.
You have.
And so you did, because your country was going through hell. Really?
You know, it was ferocious. I mean, you think of the Trojan War, you think of Odysseus and, his return to Ithaca. I mean, those journeys, we relive them in different ways. You know, that's why, because that is life. I mean, that's why I love the Homeric myths so much, because they are a template to, to life. You know, there's honor, there's courage, there's cowardice, all the different things that when we read them as stories, we are able to get that catharsis that Aristotle talks about. where you say,
Yes.
oh, he did it, I can, or I don't have to do it because, you know, he's done it and
Right.
got into danger, you know. So that literally is what, you know, I started to replicate in the ghetto. You know, now can you imagine, Tammy, I come to America at 18. I come literally to paradise. I mean,
Yeah.
I know that America, you know, has its problems, shortcomings, etc. But to me and to most immigrants, America is paradise. I mean, people must understand that as a fact. You know, the way you look at America when you have lived under oppression, whether it's Soviet oppression, apartheid oppression, you know, the tin pot dictators, the juntas, I mean, wherever on the planet, America is paradise. That's the reason why we have millions of people to this day trying to get into the country. Now, what do the citizens of the country that are blessed with these freedoms and rights do? They take them for granted.
Well, we talk about racism here, right? We talk about racism in every direction here. How can that be? Does that make any sense?
Absolutely not. I mean, to me, it's surreal. Honestly, I say, you know, of all the places on the planet that are least racist, it's America. That's a fact. Post civil rights, you know, post Jim Crow, you can go to any part of the country. First of all, nobody will ask you for a permit. That's one.
Right.
Secondly, when you go look for a job, if somebody discriminates against you, you can take them to court. And very few people do. And secondly, you can live in any neighborhood provided you have the resources.
Yes.
And the other thing is that, you know, I live in North Carolina. And I've been to a place called Appalachia. I've driven through Appalachia. You cannot tell me that those white people trapped in poverty, many of their children, you know, subjected to, you know, fentanyl, drugs, all the problems of the inner city. You cannot tell me that they are my oppressors simply because they're white.
Right. That makes no sense.
You know, say there is poverty, you know, among all groups. You know, there is, you know, the elites among all groups. I know black elites. You know, many of them have more resources than any middle class or poor white person can ever dream of having. So
poverty is a problem. Poverty is a problem, but not racism. It's poverty.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And if we could get together on that and try to bring everybody's standard of living up.
That is the challenge. And that's why education is so key. You know, that's why education is so key. And I wish with all my heart, Tammy, that parents who are like my mother in so many ways had a choice, because I've been to many inner city schools and it's brought tears to my eyes to realize that these parents have no choice but to send their children to failing schools, which are the next step to prison, because I know that pathway very clearly, because I had to make those tough choices. But it is almost impossible as a mother, you know, to be able to help your child make those choices if, first of all, there is no family. There is no family.
So no support system.
Yeah, no support system. And secondly, when the child goes to school, there is no responsibility, no accountability. You know. I mean, I remember. You remember when I played truant and
when you played
my
trick,
gang.
yes. And they came to find you in the neighborhood because you'd skipped school.
Yeah, and you know how that came about? Because my mother, illiterate, by the way, she's illiterate, but she said there is something wrong here. You know, let me take his books to the neighbor who can read, and ask, how old is this homework? And of course, it was about 4 weeks, 5 weeks old, because I've been cutting school there. And so she goes to the principal. And say, take a parcel of the biggest, strongest boys and go to that junkyard. That's where they'll find him. when they bring him here, I want you, principal, to take the biggest stick, the biggest cane. This is my mother, the mother who bore me. Says, I want you to take that cane and whip him.
Wow.
She that was love, Tammy.
Yes,
that was love. That was love.
Because there's justice in love, right?
Absolutely.
That's part. It's not just empathy. It's
justice.
No.
It's and the tough love, because if she hadn't done that, I would have been like my friends, and all of them, Tammy, are dead. Those
are they? Oh,
because when I go back to South Africa, one of the places that I visit first is the graveyard, because and I'm looking for my friends there. They're not they're in the graveyards, and I look at the names. I said, oh, there's Peter, there's Tammy, and there's Tom. I would be in the middle there if my mother hadn't exercised tough love.
Right.
Yeah. Right. I knew that she was taking no pleasure in making sure that I understood that it was more important to be in this school despite its horrors, rather than to be with a gang.
Right, because the gangs were very strong, weren't they, when you were a child?
Oh, and murderous. I mean, they were robbing people, disemboweling them for a pittance. They were, and you never quit the gang and stayed alive. And you remember the many times when my life hung in the balance, because they said, first it was for going to school. And the second time, it was for befriending white people. You remember how they said...
yes. You stood up against that. You really stood up against that.
I had to, because I knew...
What gave you the courage? What gave you the courage?
Oh, this is important. First of all, it was because my mother said, hate is like poison. You cannot drink it and expect it to kill your enemies. It doesn't work that way. That was one. And secondly, it's because I had met whites as individuals after the encounters with the police. And this is so key, Tammy. People are individuals. We are not groups.
No, we're not groups.
I've never seen a white person. If I saw them, it was like Casper the Friendly Ghost. I'd run away. Right. But I've met... James, Janice, etc., those individuals. And I have given them the benefit of the doubt. And they've done the same to me. Right. This is key, because we come from different worlds. We have different experiences, and some of those are positive and some of those are negative.
Right.
But, we have a choice to change.
Right.
Once we know better. But if you never engage, if you just say, just because a person is black or a person is white or a person is Asian or a person is like, and I hate these labels, because I just say this human being, that human being, or this American or that American, that's what makes sense to me. Black, whites, etc. Those are just, social constructs.
And they're inaccurate. Nobody's black and nobody's white.
Social constructs, which in America, when they underpin identity politics, are so destructive. Because I saw identity politics in South Africa. It was called apartheid. Apartheid.
Right.
So why are we recreating it here?
So how do you talk about those things as the same thing? Identity politics as apartheid? How do you tell people how they're the same?
Very simple. Under apartheid, there was something called the Population Registrations Act. It classified people into 4 categories: white, black, Asian, and mixed race called coloreds. And then it said that one group deserves more rights, another group doesn't. And then it would use those, distinctions to carry out affirmative action. In this case, under apartheid, it was affirmative action for Afrikaners. And the reason they carried it out, that's why it's so uncanny, it's because of the Boer War. So here in America, again, we have, identity politics taking us back to slavery, as if we could relive that, horrible time, instead of learning from it. learning. I mean, because I love history, and I know that in any century and every civilization, there's been slavery of one
Yes.
kind or the other. But
Yes.
civilizations and nations that have, prospered and advanced have learned from, those experiences. That's
Yes.
why, Churchill says that, those who, those who take history and use it as a cudgel, will lose the future.
Right.
That is what we are doing in America. Rather than learning the lessons and recognizing the tremendous progress. I mean, can you imagine, and I'm inspired by this, Frederick Douglass meeting Abraham Lincoln during the second inaugural address? Because they met, at the, and he asked, what did you think of it? I mean,
yes,
Douglass had been a fugitive slave.
Yes.
And it's interesting because when I read, because I love these heroic stories, I realized that when he arrived in Maryland, he bribed a group of white urchins by giving them his food so they could teach him to read.
I thought it was one of the masters, one of the women in the household, but that's not what happened.
Yes.
Further than that, he sought out how to learn.
Exactly. So when you hear these stories that, they had done certain things to address not only what slavery had done to America, but also the healing part, with malice towards none, with charity to all. I mean, this spirit and Dr. King coming along and saying, we have to strive for a colorblind, America, a meritocracy. Yeah. I mean, these people were right there. They fought those battles. They know what they're talking about. And when both of them recur time and time again to the Declaration of Independence, there's a reason, because that's an inspired document. You remember the story when I first read it in the shack under the a flickering candle?
Yes.
I could not believe that, someone had the courage, and inspiration and vision to say these truths are self-evident, that all men are created equal and endowed with unalienable rights of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That became my quest. I said, come what may, I must get to the promised land. And I, for some reason, if I could make it to the promised land from 8,000 miles away, why can't you make it from its heartland?
Right. Well, you had a goal, right?
Absolutely.
You had a goal.
Yeah. And the means to achieve that goal was the conviction that it is worth dying for.
Right.
You see, that is the one thing that we in America, that's the switch we must turn on as citizens, of this blessed land, is that freedom is worth dying for.
Right. And you're talking, children are being taught critical race theory in schools. How are they ever going to be looking for freedom if they're taught that stuff?
You see, that is exactly, one of the dangers that our future as Americans face. It's because rather than our children being empowered to think, critical thinking is very important. But secondly, to understand that the power of knowledge can not only, give them a better future, but it also can make America better, so that we finally become from a pluribus unum, from many one, so that we can literally not only make this last best hope of earth, a reality for everybody, but also have it continue to shine as a beacon. Instead of teaching them those lessons, the fundamentals, they are instead saying, you should hate each other and your country because of something that happened 200 plus years ago. There is no other way to commit national suicide than to teach CRT.
There is no, because if you divide people, then their vision is only between each other.
Exactly.
It's never in a direction forward.
Exactly.
And getting better. Yeah, I see.
Especially at the time of intense global competition, because that's not happening in China, that's not happening in India, that's not happening in many of these countries that are competitors. They are sending their children to school at 6 in the morning and having them leave at 5. They're learning. In fact, there was another example that was very telling. The TikTok in America, this nonsensical thing called TikTok. And then also the TikTok in China. The TikTok in China is displaying students graduating, painting, doing all these things to nourish their minds and souls. And what is our TikTok doing? Debasing.
Yes.
Debasing. That
I never look at that. It's
that's telling. One is being used to enrich and to ennoble and to empower its youth. And we are basically, debasing them, alienating them, teaching them to hate. That's how you destroy a nation. Because I go back, Tammy, to how was the Roman Empire destroyed. It was not the Goths coming in. They came in when the shell, was remaining. Rome had done it itself. And we are emulating Rome.
Rome fought, they fought among themselves.
Yes.
Yeah.
And they undermined family, they undermined morality, they undermined faith, so that when the invasion came, there was no Rome left. And this was the Rome of the Ciceros, the Julius Caesars, the Tacitus. I mean, we benefited from Rome so much in so many ways. And yet, because it could not do what it had to do to preserve its institutions, it now crumbled. It's now in ashes. And are we going to repeat a lesson that we know its consequences?
Yes, we've seen that. We have the historical evidence.
Absolutely. That's why I just want schools to start to teach about history, to teach it, the good and the bad, but to teach about mythology, to teach about, these incredible civilizations that we have been blessed with as humanity, the collective heritage. I hate this nonsense of cultural appropriation. What civilization has not learned or benefited from another? None. We all have learned from each other. We've all shared the best of each other. In fact, one of the things that when people talk about cultural appropriation, I ask them, I said, how many of you speak English? And do you know who English belongs to? Why don't you speak your? They use English to tell you not to culturally appropriate some. I mean, English is my sixth language, so I did appropriate it from somebody. But so it's nonsensical because
it's nonsense. Yeah,
that's beautiful, that's true, and that's wise belongs to humanity, belongs to all of us. And there's free human
truth beings. And justice, beauty.
Absolutely. And that's what CRT is not teaching. Instead, it's poisoning our children and saying, just because of what you look like. I mean, children are children. Put them in a yard. They will gravitate to friends in all different, ways. It doesn't matter. The last thing they see is a color until we tell them as adults.
Yes, absolutely. So how do you think COVID has, what are your thoughts on COVID?
Oh, don't get me started. I tell you, I never thought that people who are claimed to be scientists and doctors would deny science, because one of the things that and I know this from, experience, there's something called natural immunity.
Right.
That's how you deal with I dealt with so many viruses when I growing up because I had no access to medicine. So I understand the progression of, of how a virus, attenuates or infects people. But
Yes.
over here, what did we do with COVID? We used it as an instrument of power. And we punished, and this is unforgivable, Tammy. We punished a generation of our children. Do you know what happens to a child when they don't see a human face? You remember that the incident I told you, that when I saw the tears streaking that white woman's face, it confirmed her humanity and changed and saved my life. How many parents, have not been able to have their children experience that human connection because of this demand that children wear masks wherever they go.
Yes, they're having speech impediment.
Development. Because we are doing this harm to our children in the name of what? And where is the evidence? To support that? It's the contrary. You've seen what the Swedens, the Norways, the Israels, so many other countries have had their children in school without masks, and nothing has happened. So what makes us think that we are a different species? It's all about power.
It's all about power.
The perversion of, of medicine, something that is sacred. Hippocrates said, "Do no harm."
Do no harm. Exactly.
Do no harm. And yet, for the sake of power, it's almost like Kurtz. You remember in Heart of Darkness when Kurtz says the horror. I say every day, I said the horror. My goodness, the horror that is festering in our soul because people are just so driven by power. That they're willing to destroy a nation in order to rule over its ashes.
Right.
To rule over its ashes.
Right.
That
yes,
that
and what's coming? We haven't even seen the destruction of COVID yet.
That's why we must rise up. I'm saying, patriots of all races. This has nothing to do with black, white, yellow, green. It's patriots of America, lovers of liberty. Friends of humanity. We must stand up against, people who are seeking to divide us, who are so anti-human, who are harming children. That's very telling to me.
Yes.
When you harm a child, knowingly, it tells me that you have no soul. You've made a Faustian bargain. You think that these children can be sacrificed to the Moloch of power. And that is where I just say, let us rise up peacefully as parents. And I am so delighted to see parents getting involved in the education of their kids, holding accountable, these, merchants and mercenaries and disciples of hate. That's what I call them. Because they're teaching our children to hate.
Yes.
Instead of teaching them about the noble things in life, the things that will give them hope, that will make them, have dreams, that will make them work hard, that will make them, love themselves and love their
set out on a heroic journey, which is what we all need to do.
Exactly.
There's so much to know. There's so many things to learn. There's so many places to go, people to meet.
Exactly. Yes. Especially when you live in the freest country in the world.
Yeah.
And they're telling us that this country is not free, that this country is racist. If that were true, Tammy, why are millions coming here illegally? From every corner of the world. They never answer that question. They never do.
No.
They never do. No. Because they know it's the big lie. And that is the Orwellian nature of American society today that frightens me, is how Orwellian we have become.
Yes, well, we have to, when I was ill a couple of years ago, and I had a spiritual understanding that I needed to tell the truth, but not just for myself, but to everyone.
Yes.
I decided that I would speak,
Yes.
and I started my podcast, and I wanted to talk to people, and I wanted them to talk to me.
Yes.
And we can't be silent anymore.
No.
We've seen this experiment. It is failed. It is failed. Let's make a choice and change things.
Let's make a choice, especially when we are free. You see, when we are free, I mean, that to me, I mean, this is home of the brave, land of the free.
Yes.
You know, and yet we are being conditioned to behave like bond slaves, slaves. You know, especially because they know that if they can terrify us into silence. You remember that amazing, quote by Pastor Niemöller about what happens when you are afraid to speak out? They will pick you out one by one. They'll pick you out one by one. And when they've picked out the rest, you'll be alone and there'll be nobody to speak for you.
Right.
You know, yeah, that's why, Tammy, what you're doing, speaking out, it's the best form of self-protection.
Yeah, it's the only way.
Yeah, you know, don't say it's not happening to me, because believe me, someday soon it will.
Right.
Yeah, someday soon it will.
That's right. And so speak out now. Speak out now while you still have people to speak to.
Exactly. And we are many. I mean, in fact, I use this expression.
We are many.
Yeah. There are few. There are Lilliputian and there are few. We are Brodignian and we are majority, just that we are silent. You know?
Yes.
So let's rise up, because when we rise up, we are all colors, all religions, all, we are the mosaic of America. Mm-hmm. Because people fundamentally want the same thing, Tammy. They want the same thing. They want to have, families, to provide for them a better future, to have children who grow up to be the best, they can be,
mm-hmm.
and they want to have a country to love, and yet we are being told that this country is not lovable. America is not lovable. My goodness. America is not perfect, but it's the most beautiful country in the world because it sustains human.
The only thing that's perfect is death.
Exactly. Yeah.
Right?
You're right. And you remember what Shakespeare said? He said that cowards die many times before their death.
Right.
But the valiant taste not of death but once.
Mm-hmm.
So we have to remember that you will die someday. The question is, when you do, have you lived?
Have you lived?
Yeah, or just existed. There's a big difference.
Yeah. Have you hidden?
Yes.
Have you been hiding and angry and afraid?
Yes. And denying. Yes, and denying the truth, the truth that you said liberated you. You should not deny your conscience. You should not deny your values. You should not deny your principles. Above all, you should not deny your humanity.
Yeah.
And that's what we are being taught today, is to deny our humanity. And I know that, patriots out there, parents, fathers, mothers, sisters and brothers, when they hear these words, this cry from the heart to say, let's defend this beautiful land of ours, and together, create that better future for our children. I know that they will,
Yes, for our children.
Yeah, it's for our children. It's for our children. To me, it's always, and it's not just my own children, Tammy. Every child is my child, because when I see them, I see hope. Right. I see a better, and that's why when I should have mentioned this, because I got so bothered. I know that what happened to George Floyd was a tragedy. Mm-hmm. But to see his deification, his sanctification, when every week in so many ghettos, inner cities, children are killed by gangs, and nobody, says anything about that. No monument is, held up, in their memory. And yet they, compared to Floyd, they had the future before them. He had broken the law. He was the strong. I'm not saying it justifies what happened to him. That's a tragedy. But to raise him up, to deify him, tells me a lot about the intent of the people who are using race to divide Americans. Yeah. It's not about race. It's about power.
No, it's not about race. We've been there. We've been there, and we've gone beyond that.
Absolutely.
And everyone has blood on their hands. We all have blood on our hands. But what are we doing now in our lives to make things better? To bring people together.
Exactly. Make better. That's not their goal. Because if that was their goal, like it. They would know. That's not the goal. The goal is when we divide people, especially black and whites, and to make
that's
them,
so easy, It's so easy.
Yes.
It's so simple. It's so lazy.
Yeah, and so cynical and so cynical. And also, sinister too, because I just know that sometimes when you push people to the breaking point, you can trigger. You see the painting there. You can trigger, that easily.
Yes.
Yes.
So there's some deep thoughts in that woman in that picture.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's why I said, there was something that was so striking about that. And
those are the revolutionaries in Russia being shot on a hillside back in the Russian Revolution. It's we don't need that kind of division.
I mean,
but if we're going to go there, we have to rise up so that it doesn't happen.
Exactly, and that's where they're pushing us. They're pushing us. You cannot tell me. I mean, people will take a simple situation and make it so, twisted. Many of the people that went to January 6th to protest, they were just ordinary people. They were ordinary people. They were ordinary people. There were the bad elements among them, yes, but most of them were ordinary people. And what are they doing? Throwing them into the gulag. Yes. I mean, when you do that, we all know the truth, but that's making us believe that our neighbors, our brothers and sisters, who, for whatever reason, chose this and that, are our enemy. You see, that is the thing. That's the thing that is so sinister. Is when they're turning family against family, neighbor against neighbor.
Our prime minister has sent out a new protocol to the schools for the children to report on their teachers if they're teaching traditional historical facts.
You are kidding. No,
I am in a communist country up here in Canada.
You are kidding me.
No, I'm not kidding. I'm not kidding. So they're trying to, it's just
people,
completely insane.
And people don't realize, why that is so dangerous.
It's so dangerous.
Because that's what Hitler did when, that's what Hitler did. The teachers were being spied on by the students in the Third Reich.
Yes, and in Albania during the Communist Revolution.
Exactly.
They were all spying on one another. They had spy glasses inside the doorknobs and underneath the candlesticks and everywhere, in every room. They were listening to everyone and reporting on them.
That's happening in Canada, and
it's starting to happen here. Yeah.
And people are not rising. They don't realize.
No, they're not rising up because they believe that our institutions are good. They believe that they're good. And so they don't know. They have to think either that they don't know what's going on. So maybe either I'm wrong or the country is wrong. And it's easier to think that we're wrong than the country is wrong.
Yes.
But the country is wrong.
Oh my God. Oh my
goodness. And it can be wrong.
Oh yes. I mean, George Orwell said it so well that, you remember in Animal Farm and in 1984, how they take these words, freedom, democracy, etc., and then they twist them around to basically support totalitarianism, because that's what they're doing. That's what they're doing. And I saw that during the French Revolution. When I read about the French Revolution, the Dantons and Marats and Robespierres, they were doing it in liberté, égalité, fraternité, and yet they were sending people to the guillotine.
Yeah.
And they're using those, the Bolsheviks and the Mensheviks, they did that, Lenin and his, his group, when they went after Trotsky, etc. You remember, don't people realize that
they're not taught these things in school anymore? They're not taught history. They don't know what happened in Nazi Germany or in Russia or China. They don't know.
Why do they think that history needs to be studied? It's not so that we know the lessons.
We have to remember.
I cannot believe. Yeah, I cannot believe that that's happening in Canada. And that
it's a real tragedy. We're really in a very precarious position.
I hope we can reach the young people, because as I tell them, I say, it is your future that's at stake. We can, engage you, inspire you, guide you, but you have to be, in the vanguard.
Yes.
You have to be in the vanguard, and we will.
And the parents have to support them.
Yes. Yeah, I'm so glad, Tammy, thanks for sharing that story with me, because I know now where your truth is coming from, because we must tell the truth. Yeah. We cannot go along, no matter how comfortable it may feel, to go along with the lies, and how safe it may feel. It's not comfortable and it's not safe. In the end, they will come after you.
Yeah, you either fight now or you fight later. A harder, much more bigger war later.
Yes. Yeah. Especially when they've already indoctrinated our children.
Yes. Right.
Yeah. Oh. Yeah. Oh, wonderful, Tammy. It's really great. It's wonderful to see you. It's just. You remind me. My mother. You have the same fighting spirit. Because she was in a different place, but it was the same spirit that I will not sacrifice my children and their future, and she even had to do it inside the home. And how hard it was for her to countermand my father, when
I can't imagine.
But she knew that it was the truth. She was fighting for the truth. And I'm so glad
she had a very good moral compass.
Oh, yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah, she always, she just said, I'm not afraid, that's why you said, you went through that spiritual, it liberates you. You're not, going through apartheid, Tammy, I have no fear, I have no fear. Least of all in a free country, in fact, a lot of people, that's why even when you asked about COVID, I said, dozens of things can kill you. In fact, the thing that probably kills people the most is when they don't exercise and eat bad food.
Yes, and when they lie. And when they're angry. Anger kills you eventually.
Oh, it does. It does. Yeah, exactly. Oh, yes, you are absolutely right. I said those things, will get you before COVID does.
Yes. That's right. That's right.
And so, but the thing is that for a lot of people, they have been conditioned not to think, and to defer too readily to authority. Those are men and women. They're fallible. They make mistakes, and they can also be obsessed with power, especially when they know that there is so much fear in the land, because that's what they took advantage of.
Yeah.
People's fears.
Yes, right.
Yeah.
Absolutely. That's it. And they just keep bringing on more and more false narratives.
Oh yes. Yeah. In fact, I'm so sad, but I'm glad that they inspired at least what happened to the Canadian truckers.
Yes.
it was so brutal. That was so revealing to me that he
That
would
was
do
very
that.
revealing.
Yeah, it was very
Yes.
revealing to me, because I said, oh, so this is who you are. When people protest peacefully, you then label them, and defame them, and plant your stooges among them.
Yeah.
What Canadian would hold a Confederate flag? Canada is so far from the South,
Yes.
and yet
Yeah.
that's what he was using as justification.
Yeah.
You know, you know,
Absolutely. It
you
was
know,
all
yeah,
total lies.
yeah. I said, he would go to that extent, but I'm so glad that they inspired the farmers in the Netherlands now.
In the Netherlands, which
Yes.
CBC in Canada is not reporting on.
They're
There
not,
is there is
are,
no reporting
oh
on the
my
Dutch
God.
farmers.
I didn't. I mean, so CBC is in the tank for Trudeau.
Oh, they are completely, the government funds them like, I think $1.3 billion a year.
But what about the truth? What about
No,
the truth?
there's no room for the truth.
Because it was so inspiring and so heroic, and they were interviewing
Wasn't it?
one of them, saying, we got our inspiration from the Canadians. They wouldn't even report that. Oh my God!
No.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah, things have gone. We'll see. We'll see how they go.
No. I'm so glad, Tammy, that you are doing this, because as I say, I feel. I mean, I talk to people, maintenance people, anybody I run into who's willing to have a conversation. We all find ourselves agreeing. We're even meeting for the first time. So I know that we are the majority.
Yes,
it's just that they control the instruments of information.
Yeah.
Right. and they are buttressed by the censorship through social media, like the Twitters and the Facebooks. But I'm just saying that even with that, if we can continue through the voice,
if more of us speak, they can't.
Yes.
I mean,
yes,
they won't be able to censor us all. So we have to all get on our platform and speak.
Yes,
and we can do that. We can do that. I did it. I didn't think I could do that. I did it. Anybody could do it.
Yes.
I just asked God for courage and strength, and off I go.
Yes, yeah. Oh yes. And to know that you are standing with truth.
Yes.
Nothing. I mean, even people don't realize that even when you kill somebody or nail them on the cross, 2,000 years later, that truth will rise and influence the world.
Yes.
That's what they did. In fact, my mother would tell me that. She says, they crucified Christ, but we today recognize the example and the message, of brotherhood and sisterhood and love and humanity that he was spreading.
Yes, and we don't want to disappoint him.
No, we cannot. We cannot.
We cannot. He won't allow it.
No. Because he said the kingdom of God is in you, each one of you. Mm-hmm. Each one of you. Meaning that is where I live. I should live inside of you. Not in some building, that's okay for you to get together, but I must live inside of you and shape how you live your life. So I would rather do that, Tammy, by how I treat people, than to treat them like dirt and then on Sunday or whenever go to church and, sing. No. It's when I, live what I believe.
24 hours a day.
Yes. Yeah. When I live what I believe, and when I give the best example I can to the young people looking up at me, because that's the way. Yeah. Because they're watching. Because
they're watching. Because they need to watch. Because they have to learn how. They have to learn who to be.
The things that they see, Tammy, their parents and adults do. I say, what we are doing to our children by example. Mm-hmm. So, thank you.
Thank you so much. That was a lot of fun.